Hey everybody, I'm Connor Shaw, and this video is going to have a bit more of a casual atmosphere because I'm making it in a bit of a hurry, but let's talk about GTFO's alpha. For those of you who don't know, GTFO is an upcoming 4-player co-op horror shooter developed by 10 Chambers. You may know some of the devs for their previous work on some of these games before they kind of broke off and compiled their own studio. I've been looking forward to this title for a while, not just because I've been craving a new co-op FPS, but more specifically a different one. I'm a bit tired of run-of-the-mill, run-and-gun, Left 4 Dead-likes. I'm looking for something that shakes up the genre a bit, and GTFO, with its promise of terror, focus on stealth, and lean on team play over gunplay, may just be the next time sink I've been looking for. On October 28th, 2019, a free alpha was released for the game, and I wanted to go over some of my first impressions of a game I've been looking forward to for months, if not years. First off, I'll say it up front, I'm impressed. The atmosphere, enemy and environmental design, music and graphics are all surpassing my expectations from a smaller team. Aside from the obnoxious screamer intro whenever the game is launched, the suspenseful horror 10 Chambers has promised seems to be, in my opinion, fully realized. And not just in an appearance, very much in the gameplay as well. As I mentioned before, GTFO, while being a shooter through and through, is not reliant on the run-and-gun gameplay you may be familiar with from aforementioned titles. However, unlike other shooters which promise similar difficulty, this is not accomplished by making firearms feel like Nerf guns. Guns are plenty powerful and will take down individual targets with ease. The difficulty isn't found in their power, rather in their sound. Enemies in GTFO are heavily, if not entirely, reliant on listening out for their targets. If you're crouched and sneak quietly, taking care not to make any noise when enemies' quote heartbeats are alight, you can charge up a hefty swing and clobber foes one by one to clear out rooms, at least with smaller targets. However, start firing or sprinting willy-nilly and everyone in the chamber will be alerted to your presence and come after you all at once. The chambers, by the way, are worth mentioning, as the developer's name would imply. I wrote that joke, and I hate that joke because they're called 10 Chambers, and I thought that was real funny at the time. Okay, so yeah, there's a multitude of chambers that make up the bulk of GTFO's alpha map, and presumably its general gameplay structure. Rather than giant chasms or wide open areas, GTFO is broken up into smaller chunks, with doors serving as barricades to block noise between rooms and as rather temporary blockades from those already alerted to your presence. These rooms are each indicated by an area number and a sub-area letter, such as 11A or 10F. This is important for one of my favorite features in the game, the terminals. These computers can be found and properly typed into using commands to carry out simple tasks such as locating items. For instance, you could, say, find a door that's locked and requires an orange keycard. Pay attention to the product number of the card you're after, bring it back to the terminal, type query and the card's name, and voila, you'll be pointed in the right direction with a room number and letter. As far as I know, although I'm not currently aware of the commands necessary to do this, this system can be used to track down equipment as well, such as ammo packs, medkits, glow sticks, and the like. This leads me to one of my first gripes with the game, the random loot spawns. Being stuck at 20% health, which is as high as a player can passively regenerate to, and finding glow sticks for the 4th time in a locker that could spawn healing supplies proves more frustrating than spooky. By the way, I should mention, when a player hits 0 life, instead of just dying outright like I expected, they're knocked down and able to be revived. The game only ends when all players get knocked down, so there's always a chance to pull yourself back from the brink if you're elusive and accurate enough. Speaking of, by default, you're equipped with a melee weapon, 2 firearms, and a special tool, such as a sentry gun, glue cannon, or lifeform scanner, the final of which I find to be the most typically useful for at least one player to bring. The weapon types like shotguns, SMGs, pistols, etc. all have different starting ammo counts based on their power, which I like quite a bit in terms of game balance. While bringing a DMR and a shotgun might be the most effective single target removal strategy, you may be better off bringing a backup pistol instead with more ammo to spare when things get hairy, and spreading out your low ammo powerhouses amongst your team. While on the subject, GTFO is very much not a game meant to be played alone in its current state, if at all. While I personally hope to see some content tailored to a single-player friendly experience, maybe maybe difficulty settings too, which I certainly hope will be added in the future, the reliance on teamwork by itself is by no means a flaw. You have to maintain constant communication with your team in order to scrape by in this title, keeping everyone informed of enemy positions, console codes, health, and ammo reserves. You're pretty much going to have to use voice chat for this. Even though there is an in-game chat, it just simply isn't fast enough, and the ping system as it currently stands only works for like items and doorways. You can't actually ping enemy locations, which seems incredibly important and a bit weird to have been left out. I hope that wasn't on purpose. But generally speaking, when my team died or was heavily chewed up in GTFO, we could usually pinpoint how and where we screwed up, whether it be turning a corner too fast without peeking first to check for enemies, or getting too hasty on the trigger when a simple melee attacks would have sufficed for the threat at hand. The major exceptions were the security alarm events, where hordes of enemies would endlessly come running from all angles. These felt much less fair in terms of survivability, and it felt like a complete necessity to bring a sentry gun or two to keep the crew in any kind of decent shape. If I'm being honest with you, I never made it past this part of the level, so I don't really know how this game amps up from there on. However, even in failure, I was having fun, so that speaks volumes in and of itself, I'd reckon. Now, since this video is all kinds of rushed due to time constraints, here's the part where I just kind of throw out a bunch of problems I have all at once. If anyone at 10 Chambers is listening, first of all, great work. I'm thoroughly impressed. I'm very excited for the future of this game. But these problems, just know, they come out of love. I want to make this game better. So first of all, enemy spawns could do with reworking. Having seen multiple sleepers spawn right next to one another on the other side of doors or together in corridors, it can make stealth incredibly obnoxious, and the whole red light, green light mechanic with heartbeats feels very basic, or perhaps simply my understanding of it is. I could see other layers being added to this, making noise in the distance to draw enemies over to that point and investigate, in the further future of development, of course. I don't really know how you're supposed to deal with scouts when alerted by intercepting their tendrils, which is a very cool visual effect, by the way. These bulky enemies will spawn in foes from every nook and cranny, even places you've already cleared, and it feels like the most unfair of the enemies I've faced. Nearest I can figure is to just avoid them, which is entirely fair, but sometimes they spawn directly in the path of progression that you have to clear in order to proceed, and again, the stock screamer sounds and loud, obnoxious breathing upon readying it up, that's all gotta go. You already have a horror atmosphere. The tension is already high. You don't need to resort to cheap jump scares. Also, a kind of stealth narration insert here. While I was editing the footage back, I realized how flashy the game can be overall, as in literally flashy. Muzzle flares and menu stylizing can lead to some headaches for a person like me with photosensitivity. So an eventual photosensitive toggle in the options, which could reduce muzzle flash, particularly on the SMG, and tone down the flickering effect in the menus, would be much appreciated. And overall, melee could do with being a little less all or nothing. It feels like you either fully charge up an attack or you might as well be spitting on them. Especially when enemies are gibbed but still alive, it often feels unfair when a perfectly good stealth attack just fails for what, as far as I can tell, is no reason. I suppose variations of melee weapons are to come once the game is out of alpha, so I won't harp too much on this. But in comparison to the whole of the spectacle, my gripes are minor. And of course, there's a million problems I could list about small bugs, clunky elements, glitchy visuals and the sort, but again, those are better directly sent to the devs in the form of bug reports. And I know I've mocked games with frequent betas in the past, linked to my video about Killing Floor 2's DLC debacle above, but the major differences with the way GTFO is handling the alpha, so those of you out there who are curious won't call me a hypocrite, are the alpha is free, and it's made its goal clear from the start, testing online multiplayer functionality, making sure there are no major issues with peer-to-peer connectivity, and if there are, ironing them out. Regardless, where was I? Reactions I've seen from players so far have been generally fascinating, the most common tone being, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought. It seems 10 Chambers may have been somewhat worried that their history with developing run-and-gun arcadey shooters would lead players to assume the same of this title, and then complain that it's too difficult as a result. But the general consensus seems to instead be, continuing my earlier example, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought, let's go again! I don't exactly see GTFO replacing a lot of people's go-to co-op shooting games, as it's simply not the same beast. It's trying to more specifically hone in on the co-op part rather than the shooty bit, so ideally it can exist as its own title with its own special flavor alongside titans of the overarching genre. Maybe it's just that I'm in the mood for something spooky this Halloween, but overall GTFO is firmly staying on my radar, and if anything, I'm more excited for it than ever before. Its focus on strategy over shooty scooty is refreshing, to say the least. I'll likely stream the game when it releases or in future betas, just haven't really been in the right headspace for streams lately. If you want to keep up with all that and find a link to the game on Steam, all the relevant links are in the description below. Thanks for watching, and take it easy.